Welcome. I'm Olalekan Moyoserelalde. I'll be talking to you about digital right and hate speech, navigating social media for effective advocacy. Uh, in today's world, we've seen that politics and social freedom have actually become a thing. Uh, they've become something that has been transferred from the real time to the virtual space. And what do I mean by the real time? I mean, from the time where we would sit in places to discuss liberty and social freedom. It's on TV, on some other media. Now it has become a virtual thing on the internet. So, for instance, in 2015, we saw how Buhari's victory, President Buhari's victory, was brought about by social media influencers. And so this has shown us that social media has the power to effect change within any polity. So, considering the reach of the internet in the 21st century, we see that it has become quite necessary to use the internet as a means to connect with other people for many reasons. Now, globalization would never become this pronounced if it weren't for the internet. The internet was the marking of the globalization age. And then the advent of social media, we see that the internet was limited in many regards. The interaction between individuals was not made more uh, 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 effective, except when the social media came on board. And so the social media as an internet platform provides a safe space for free speech. That's what it is supposed to be about, because the social media actually brings some form of anonymity, and so people enjoy this anonymity to express freely what is on their minds. So it will be necessary to consider the kind of rights available for advocacy on the social media and how to advocate within the bounds of the law. In the backdrop of this, I would like to talk about digital rights and hate speech. Now, digital rights, uh, digital rights would be much talked about later. But firstly, I would like to uh, give a definition of social media. So, social media is a set of the interactive digital tools that connect groups of individuals interested in dialogue or information. When used for advocacy, these tools help to build a network of supporters. Now, this is like the formation of social media advocacy, whereby a social media advocate must have a network of supporters, must have a base for support, because the advocacy in itself is never made more effective when there is no base for support. So social media is also referred to as Web 2.0 because of its interactive capacity. You see, the interactive capacity of social media makes it even more expressive than the internet itself. So it should not be mistaken for the World Wide Web, which does not enable interactions. We know that the internet in whole is the World Wide Web. So uh, there are numerous social media tools, including blogs, videos, and social networks. We see video vloggers, we see vloggers, we see people, social media influencers. And so this is a huge form. We see how Vimeo, we've seen how YouTube, we've seen how some other, Snapchat, yes. We've seen how many of these social media tools have brought about interaction more between individuals and how it is shaping our polity. So we see that each tool has a unique set of features that have the potential to expand the reach of information across individuals, organizations, and communities. So we see the features that have been added to these social media platforms as enabling the individuals to further reach and to further express themselves uh, amongst them other people. So, furthermore, social media expands the reach and inclusivity of an advocacy campaign by enabling supporters to join a cause regardless of geographical location, timing, or disability. As we see what we are doing, We see that social media has enabled this to happen. We see that social media actually has a way of linking people in time without them meeting at a specific place to do whatever it is they want to do. So social media could be used as a tool for conferencing or many other things. So it could also be used as a tool for rallying campaigns for different kind of uh, for different kinds of agenda. So although social media users apparent benefits, many people are uneasy about how and when to leverage these tools in advocacy. We see how fear, especially of government intervention in recent times, has actually made people quite hesitant in using social media as a tool of advocacy. So, in navigating social media safely for advocacy, it has become quite important to know what digital rights are and how they are crucial to social media advocacy. We see that the very core of social media advocacy itself is digital rights, because without digital rights, social media advocacy would be impossible. So, what are digital rights? Digital rights are rights that are based on three elements. Now, the three elements of digital rights are right to privacy, internet access, and freedom of expression. So we see that these three elements of digital rights are essential to the survival of an open society. An open society, a democratic society, a society that intends to advance politically and socially. So rights to privacy, we see that rights to privacy involves uh, your right to maintain some information private to you, your right to make sure that your space, your virtual space, is protected adequately. So, internet access is very, very important as it brings about this kind of rights. So, internet access is something that has become quite a subject of debate as to whether government should, because it's not within laws, of countries. It's not something that is provided within the law as a right, but it has become quite essential in this day and age because more and more expression finds itself more open on the internet. So internet access is essential to social media advocacy because without access to the internet, you cannot carry out social media advocacy. So, and we see that internet access over time has been under attack in different countries. You see how China restricts internet access, and we see how freedom of expression has been under attack too. We see cases recently of journalists, of social media influencers being hounded by governments. Uh, how this is affecting social media advocacy. So, internet shutdowns, like I talked about before, attacks on press freedom and pushback against digital rights. These are abuses that are beginning to be quite common in Africa. We see how the internet was brought down in Cameroon sometime back. We see how this is quite a phenomenon that's increased significantly in 2016, which continued till 2017. So in Nigeria, many social media advocates have been under persecution for their political views. We've seen how Fisayo Soyombo has been has been living in fear because of what he was able to uncover. And when information becomes public, then the bearer of the information becomes quite under attack. So we see the line of ethics within social media advocacy and what social media advocacy stands for. So, internet shutdowns are a drastic step by government to control ideas, to control ideas on social media, to control ideas in this virtual space. And this is not just an attack on the virtual space, it's an attack on democracy because democracy cannot advance when internet access is affected. because internet access is essential to adequate criticism on that, on in the virtual space. So in the past, there have been a widespread arrest of ordinary citizens for exercising their right to freedom of expression online in Africa. You see, Africa is still a continent that is still much under the shackles of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. And we see how these contrasts with the freedom of the open society, which is beginning to extend towards Africa. And Africa, the African governments, especially the totalitarian ones or the authoritarian ones, are trying to fight this change by making sure that the internet is their first point of attack, because it is on the internet that a lot begins to happen. People begin to exchange ideas. So we could see an instance of this in the Arab Spring, which brought about the overthrow, or the overthrow of Gaddafi's government. It started from the social media, and this shows how powerful the social media is. So pitfalls to avoid in social media advocacy. There are pitfalls to avoid in social media advocacy, and there are two of them, which I'm going to talk about now. Hate speech. What is hate speech? I, Hate speech is a complicated concept, and I would like to define it from the Council of Europe's uh, 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 definition. So the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers recommendation number 97/20 states that for the purposes of the application of the principles therein, the term hate speech shall be understood as covering all forms of expression which spread, incite, promote, or justify racial hatred, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, or other forms of hatred based on intolerance, including intolerance expressed through aggressive nationalism and ethnocentrism, discrimination and hostility against minorities, migrants, and people of immigrant origin. So, uh, all forms. So, hate speech is not just when someone goes online to start to say things or to um, post things that are not that are against some of the things that have been listed out here. But hate speech goes beyond that. It will come in the form of a cartoon. We've seen, I think, the instance of the Charlie Hebdo cartoon of Muhammad. Now we see that this is one thing that many people do not know. Uh, Respect for religions, respect for religious freedom, respect for other people's religion are one of those things that should be taken into consideration. And taking those things into consideration will help in falling into the pitfalls, or would help in avoiding the pitfalls, because hate speech could come up in putting up cartoons or any other thing, that might insult or offend the religion or the identity of other people. So um, there's a difference between hate speech and hate propaganda. Now, hate propaganda is systematic. It's systematic because it is structured. It has a structured form. It could be that the government or a group of people are using it to actually bring up bias, or to incite, bring up certain kind of bias or prejudice against some other set of people. You could see this in the case of Nnamdi Kanu, whereby he would say very uh, uh, hurtful things about either the government or some other tribes in Nigeria. So we see this instance as a very, very good example of what its speech is about. So, uh, you see, if I were to dissect that situation, the kind of situation, because many people have actually talked about it, and but they tend to fall short of what actually it is about, because in Nnamdi Kanu's case, government arresting him was not actually wrong, but in actually abusing his rights, his fundamental human right, notwithstanding limited hate speech was the problem. So we know that we have rights, but these rights are limited because we are living in a society with other humans. As Aristotle said, he who is deviant is either a god or a beast. So we must live within the bounds of the law, even as social media advocates. So the second pitfall in social media advocacy is sedition. What is sedition? Sedition under the Nigerian law is under Section 50, subsection 2 of the Criminal Code. It defines seditious intention as an intention to bring into hatred or contempt or excite disaffection against the person of the president or of the governor of the state or the government of the federation, or to excite the citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria to attempt to procure the alteration or otherwise than by lawful means of any other matter in Nigeria as by law established. Now we see that the first one, trying to bring up sentiments against the person in authority, and that the governor or the president, trying to malign or defame the person of the president or the governor. These are seditious things. These are things that should not be found within social media advocacy because even, looking at argumentative rules within philosophy, we see that ad hominem, that is character assassination, is not permitted under argumentation. So if you are going to advocate for a cause, make sure that it does not touch on the person, on the individual in government, because you are trying to address the situation, you are trying to correct something and not slander or defame someone. So you see, when we look at the other elements of sedition, which is to excite the citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria to attempt to secure the operation. See, uh, lawful means, unlawful means. These are what creates the thin line between sedition and what is non-seditious. So, trying to procure an alteration of any matter in Nigeria, you have to do it by lawful means. Now, protest is one of those lawful means, but then there are ways in which to actually protest because you must first of all notify the police of your intention to protest. So you are trying to do it legally. So going to riot, burning down buildings, um, uh, vandalizing properties, that is not lawful. And so when you begin to do this because you are trying to pass across an idea, that is a seditious intention. Because by doing that, you might also trigger some other people's sentiment and some other people's bias, and also joining you to do that too. So to raise discontent or disaffection amongst the citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria, or to promote feelings of ill will and hostility between different classes of the population of Nigeria. Now, trying to create discontent and disaffection against citizens, among citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria, trying to tell them that, okay, we must pull down the government, we must do this, we must do that. Now, these are not very responsible ways of engaging social media advocacy, or to make sure that classes of people within Nigeria are not in unity, trying to create division by saying certain things or posting certain things are very irresponsible ways to engage social media advocacy. So we see that there are certain things which can be done, which are within the bounds of the law and which are non-seditious, which is an act of speech or publication which by reason intends to show that the president or the governor of a state has been misled or mistaken in any measure in the federation of the state, as the case may be. Now, not attacking the person of the figure in authority by attending to the facts of a particular matter, trying to correct a particular matter by responding to the matter itself and not the person of the governor or president. Is actually uh, non-seditious and irresponsible way to engage social media advocacy. So you must take in mind that you must engage social media advocacy by attending to the matter and not attacking any character. Okay, to show that the president or the governor of the state, to point out errors or defects in the government or constitution of Nigeria or of any state thereof as by law established in legislation. So we see that pointing out errors or defects in the government or in the constitution are non-seditious things. When you see that an act of government is defective or erroneous, you could advocate on that act itself, you know, or within the constitution itself, you could criticize the constitution. So these are non-seditious things, criticism of the constitution, criticism of the provisions of the constitution are not non-seditious ways to engage social media advocacy. To persuade the citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria to attempt to procure by lawful means, the alteration of any matter in Nigeria as by law established. So we must say that in trying to effect change, we must do it by lawful means, and this is non-seditious. So it is very important to take into cognizance that lawful means involves that uh, due process, doing things accordingly, the way it ought to be done. So to persuade the citizens or other inhabitants of Nigeria to attempt to prepare, okay, going through this. So I would like to conclude that good social media advocacy must be done within the bounds of the law, as I've reiterated many times, and it must be done conscientiously. With conscience, with your conscience, you must engage good social media advocacy because social media advocacy cannot be done responsibly without conscience. It must be done responsibly and professionally. It is not something where you come to start to attack people rather than attacking facts. So one must engage social media advocacy responsibly and not abuse it because it is in the abuse of social media that the advocacy in itself becomes non-effective and becomes destructive rather than constructive. So having in mind that social media advocacy must be constructive, must be done responsibly and within the bounds of the law. So it is at this point that I would like to conclude.